While Gregg Allman's legendary blues rock legacy lives on, his 5 children's stories reveal shocking truths about growing up in rock royalty's shadow. From a son who started using heroin at 11 and recently overdosed in 2025, to another child with his father's face tattooed over his heart who survived knife attacks and cancer, these aren't typical celebrity offspring tales. One son didn't even meet his father until he was a teenager, while a daughter deliberately chose nursing over music to escape the family spotlight. Here's what really happened to Gregg Allman's children. Michael Sean Allman. Michael Sean Allman's life began with a web of confusion and tragedy that would shape his entire relationship with identity and family. Born on July 3, 1966, in Daytona Beach, Florida, Michael was the product of a brief encounter between legendary rocker Gregg Allman and Mary Lynn Sutton, a go-go dancer who met the young musician at a Maitland discotheque during the height of the 1960s party scene. What makes Michael's story particularly heartbreaking is that he spent the first years of his life completely unaware of his true parentage. His mother married a man named Hendrik shortly after Michael's birth to legitimize the child, giving Michael the surname Hendrik rather than Allman. When that brief union ended, Mary Lynn married Daniel Green, and Michael grew up believing Green was his biological father, taking on yet another last name and forming what he thought was a genuine father-son bond. The foundation of Michael's childhood was shattered when he was just 6 years old. Daniel Green, the man Michael knew as his father, died tragically in a Learjet crash, leaving the young boy devastated and mourning the loss of what he believed was his dad. It was during this period of grief that Mary Lynn finally revealed the truth about Michael's real father, telling him that the legendary Gregg Allman of the Allman Brothers Band was actually his biological parent. This revelation set Michael on a difficult path of trying to understand his place in a famous family while dealing with the complex emotions of loss, abandonment, and identity confusion. Unlike many celebrity children who grow up in the spotlight, Michael had to navigate the strange experience of discovering his rock star heritage after already forming his sense of self around a completely different father figure. The physical manifestation of Michael's complicated relationship with his famous father is permanently etched on his body. He has an elaborate tattoo covering his torso, featuring Gregg Allman's face positioned directly over his heart, with fingers that spell out the phrase, "It is what it is." This deeply personal artwork represents both his acceptance of his heritage and perhaps his resignation to the complex emotions that come with being the son of a prowess legend he barely knew during his formative years. Michael's adult life has been marked by significant trauma and survival. In the early 1990s, while working as a DJ at a South Carolina nightclub, he became caught up in a violent incident that nearly cost him his life. After a bouncer ejected 3 drunk patrons from the establishment, the men returned with guns and began shooting at the ceiling. When their weapon jammed, Michael made the dangerous decision to chase them outside, where they turned on him with knives. The attack was so severe that he required 300 stitches to repair the wounds to his chest, leaving him with permanent scars that serve as a reminder of how quickly violence can erupt. Later in life, Michael faced another life-threatening challenge when he was diagnosed with testicular cancer in 2002. The diagnosis came at a time when he had stepped away from music to focus on family life and construction work, and the cancer forced him to confront his own mortality. He underwent surgery to remove the affected testicle and endured months of uncertainty before being declared cancer-free 8 months later. During this health crisis, Gregg Allman stepped up in one of the few times in their relationship, paying all of Michael's medical bills and providing the financial support his son needed during recovery. Throughout his struggles, Michael has pursued music with the Michael Allman Band, releasing albums including Hard Labor Creek in 2009 and Blues Travels Fast in 2020, while grappling with the weight of carrying his father's surname and the expectations that come with rock and roll royalty. Devon Allman. Devon Allman's relationship with his legendary father began not through family gatherings or childhood memories, but through a single paragraph written by a 15-year-old boy who had grown up without knowing the man who had given him life. Born on August 10, 1972, Devon was the son of Gregg Allman and Shelley K. Jeffts, but his parents' marriage was so brief that it ended when Devon was still an infant, leaving him to grow up in St. Louis, Missouri, completely separated from his father's world of Southern rock and blues. For the first 15 years of his life, Devon lived as if Gregg Allman was simply a name rather than his father, raised by his mother in the Midwest, while his biological dad toured with the Allman Brothers Band and lived the chaotic lifestyle of a rock star. The distance wasn't just geographical but emotional, as Gregg was largely absent during Devon's formative years, leaving the boy to develop his own identity and musical interests without the influence or presence of his famous parent. The turning point in their relationship came in an unexpectedly simple way when Devon was 15 years old and happened to see Gregg's music video for "I'm No Angel" playing on MTV. Something about seeing his father on television sparked a desire for connection, and Devon decided to reach out in the most straightforward way possible by writing a brief, one-paragraph letter that essentially said, "Hey, I am your son." This simple communication opened the door to a relationship that had been absent for his entire childhood. When they finally met in person, the connection was immediate and powerful, with Devon later describing how they bonded instantly despite the years of separation. This reunion led to opportunities for Devon to sit in with the Allman Brothers Band during performances, often playing his father's signature song, "Midnight Rider," alongside the legendary musician, creating the kind of father-son musical moments that had been impossible during his childhood. Devon channeled his musical talents into creating his own path, forming the band Honey Tribe in 1999 and later becoming a founding member of the blues rock supergroup Royal Southern Brotherhood, alongside New Orleans legend Cyril Neville. The Royal Southern Brotherhood achieved significant success, with their debut album reaching number 5 on the Billboard Blues chart and earning them critical acclaim as they toured internationally and performed at prestigious venues, including London's Royal Albert Hall. However, in 2014, at what appeared to be the height of the band's success, Devon made the surprising decision to leave Royal Southern Brotherhood, playing his final show with the group at the Wani Festival in Live Oak, Florida, in April of that year. This departure from a successful project reflected Devon's pattern of restlessly moving between musical ventures and his desire to forge his own artistic path rather than remain tied to any single project. The most devastating period of Devon's life came when he lost both of his parents within just a few months of each other. His mother, Shelley Jeffts, died in December 2016, and then, before he had fully processed that loss, his father, Gregg Allman, passed away from liver cancer in May 2017. This back-to-back tragedy left Devon grieving two of the most important people in his life, and forced him to step away from promoting his own solo work to help honor his father's final album, Southern Blood, which Gregg had completed shortly before his death. Elijah Blue Allman. Elijah Blue Allman's troubled journey began when he was just 7 years old, and his mother Cher made the decision to send him away to boarding school, a choice that would create lasting wounds in their relationship and set the stage for decades of struggle with abandonment, addiction, and mental health issues. Born on July 10, 1976, Elijah was the only child of the pop superstar Cher and legendary Allman Brothers Band founder Gregg Allman, but their brief marriage dissolved when he was just 3 years old, leaving him caught between two very different worlds. The boarding school experience proved traumatic for young Elijah, who later described the profound sense of rejection he felt at being sent away from home at such a tender age. In a 2014 interview, he explained how difficult it was to feel wanted when you go to boarding school at 7 years old, It's kind of hard to feel like you're not being shunned. This early separation from his family became the foundation for the emotional struggles that would plague him throughout his life. What makes Elijah's story particularly shocking is how early his drug use began and how it escalated during his school years. At just 11 years old, while other children his age were playing video games or riding bicycles, Elijah was experimenting with marijuana and ecstasy during weekend visits home to New York City. He would venture into Harlem with friends to purchase these drugs, an activity he later described as feeling normal at the time, but acknowledged was shocking to think about myself at like 11 years old, buying drugs in Harlem. As Elijah grew older, his drug use progressed to harder substances including heroin, which he described as a way to escape all the things in my past. His addiction issues persisted into adulthood, despite multiple attempts at rehabilitation, creating an ongoing cycle of recovery and relapse that deeply concerned his family. His struggles were compounded by what his mother's legal team later described as schizoaffective disorder, which can cause periods of psychosis and has reportedly led to multiple involuntary psychiatric holds. The situation between Elijah and Cher reached a legal breaking point in late 2023, when the entertainment icon filed for conservatorship over her son's finances, claiming he was currently unable to manage his assets due to severe mental health and substance abuse issues. Court documents revealed that Cher was specifically concerned about Elijah receiving distributions from a trust fund established by his late father. Fearing that any money given to him would be immediately spent on drugs, leaving Elijah with no assets to provide for himself, and putting Elijah's life at risk. Adding another layer of complexity to the family drama, Elijah's wife, Mariangela King, filed explosive allegations in court, claiming that Cher had orchestrated his kidnapping in November 2022, while the couple was attempting to reconcile their troubled marriage at a hotel. According to King's court filing, this alleged abduction occurred on their anniversary, as they were trying to work out their marriage. The conservatorship battle was ultimately resolved through private mediation in September 2024, but the underlying issues persisted. In June 2025, the situation reached a crisis point when Elijah suffered a near-fatal drug overdose at his rented home in Landers, California. Authorities responding to reports of erratic behavior found drugs inside the residence and rushed him to a hospital in Joshua Tree, where sources described him as being very lucky to have survived the incident. Delilah Allman. Delilah Allman made perhaps the most surprising choice of all of Gregg Allman's children by deliberately turning her back on the music industry and choosing a path of service and privacy that stands in stark contrast to the rock and roll legacy that surrounded her childhood. Born on November 5, 1980, to Gregg Allman and his fourth wife, Julie Bindus, Delilah grew up during a period when her father was at the height of his solo career and the Allman Brothers Band was experiencing renewed success. Unlike her siblings, who embraced various aspects of the music world, Delilah made a conscious decision early in life to forge her own path completely outside the entertainment industry. She chose to pursue nursing, a profession focused on healing and helping others rather than seeking fame or building on her family's musical reputation. This career choice required years of dedicated study and training, demonstrating her commitment to establishing her own professional identity based on skill and compassion rather than inherited celebrity. What makes Delilah's background particularly fascinating is the extraordinary musical environment she experienced during her formative years, which makes her rejection of that world all the more deliberate. During her high school years, she would regularly come home from school to find legendary musicians sitting in her living room, including guitar icon Eric Clapton, who would visit with her father for informal jam sessions and social visits. Rather than being starstruck or drawn into these musical gatherings, Delilah would politely greet the visiting legends and then excuse herself to focus on her homework, showing even as a teenager that her priorities lay elsewhere. This anecdote reveals something important about Delilah's character and the intentional boundaries she created between herself and the music world. While other young people might have been thrilled to hang around such legendary figures or tried to insert themselves into the musical conversations, Delilah consistently chose academic achievement and personal goals over the glamour and excitement that surrounded her family life. In her personal life, Delilah has continued this pattern of choosing substance over celebrity by marrying a neurosurgeon, a partnership that reflects her values of education, professional achievement, and service to others. This marriage connects her to someone whose career, like hers, is built on years of rigorous training and dedication to helping people in their most vulnerable moments, rather than seeking public attention or fame. One of the most notable aspects of Delilah's adult life is her decision to go by her middle name, Island, rather than her first name, a choice that may reflect her desire to create some distance from her identity as a member of the Allman family. This preference for her middle name also connects her to one of her father's most personal songs, as Gregg Allman wrote a track called Island that appeared on his album Just Before the Bullets Fly, which many believe was written specifically for his daughter. Throughout her adult life, Delilah has maintained an intensely private existence, deliberately avoiding media attention and refusing to trade on her famous father's name for personal or professional gain. She has been described by those who have worked with her as someone who wants to be judged entirely on her own merits and achievements rather than her family connections, a principle that has guided her choices in both her nursing career and her personal relationships. Layla Brooklyn Allman. Layla Brooklyn Allman took the most rebellious musical path of all her siblings by deliberately choosing to create aggressive metal and screamo music that stood in complete opposition to her father's legendary blues rock and sound, establishing her own artistic identity at a remarkably young age through sheer determination and creative vision. Born on March 31, 1993, to Gregg Allman and radio journalist Shelby Blackburn, Layla was the youngest of Gregg's children and grew up during a period when her father was attempting to balance his rock star lifestyle with the responsibilities of fatherhood. What makes Layla's story particularly extraordinary is how early she committed to music and how deliberately she chose a sound that would set her apart from the Allman family legacy. At just 12 years old, she joined what would become the band Picture Me Broken, originally called Lane 4, and immediately began developing a musical style that incorporated elements of post-hardcore, screamo, and metal that were completely different from the southern rock and blues that had made her father famous. Layla's musical journey began when she discovered bands like AFI in 5th grade, after developing a crush on someone who wore their shirt, which led her to explore darker, more aggressive rock music. This discovery sparked her interest in what she described as cryptic lyrics and an aggressive mix of clean vocals and screaming, a style that would become her signature as she developed her vocal abilities to include both beautiful melodic singing and powerful screaming techniques that could rival male vocalists in the metal scene. Her dedication to her craft paid off when Picture Me Broken achieved significant recognition in the music industry, winning an MTV Video Music Award for Best Breakout Bay Area Artist in 2009, and being named one of the top unsigned bands by Pure Volume that same year. The band's success continued to grow as they released multiple EPs and a full album, with their music featuring Layla's distinctive ability to seamlessly transition between haunting melodies and aggressive screaming vocals that impressed critics and fans alike. The pinnacle of Picture Me Broken's mainstream success came when they were selected as the opening act for the Masters of Madness tour in 2013, sharing the stage with legendary shock rock icons Alice Cooper and Marilyn Manson. This tour represented a major achievement for the band and demonstrated how far they had come from their early days as teenagers playing covers at local venues. establishing them as a legitimate force in the alternative metal scene. Throughout her career, Layla has displayed a maturity and ambition that she herself has acknowledged, stating, "I always say that I'm mentally 40, and explaining that she has always strived to do something a little more grandiose and have always kind of reached for the stars and accomplished things ahead of my time. This drive for excellence has been evident in everything she created, as she insisted that her work be something she could be proud of at any age. Despite achieving considerable success and recognition, Picture Me Broken went on hiatus in 2014, bringing an end to what had been a promising career trajectory. The band's hiatus came at a time when they appeared to be gaining momentum in the industry, making the decision to step back all the more surprising to fans and industry observers who had watched Layla develop from a young teenager with big dreams into accomplished vocalist and performer.